the 6th, 2024. Welcome aboard. First in, we're going into Committee of the Whole, which is there is no business, so we'll move on to Health and Public Safety. Mr. Amrine.
Yes, the first item on the agenda is the Warming Center discussion with Anne Marie Noble. Bridget?
Thank you. As was requested by council last month for the administration to get information on a warming center, I reached out to Anne Marie Noble. Those of you that may not know her, I know her from my days back when I was at Coleman, Family Community Services work, but she is now the Executive Director of Shepherd House, which had been known as the Haven of Portage County, but the confusion with Haven of Rest in Akron was becoming a challenge, so they just recently changed and rebranded as Shepherd House. So for those of you who do not know what they do, they actually provide 24-hour care. The residents that are there that are homeless are not there during the day, but they do wraparound services, provide meals. If you ever get a chance to tour the facility, I strongly suggest you do. They do so much on so little. And one of the services they have done in the past is a warming center. So we do not have the facilities here in Kent to provide that. We have looked at this, I think going back, Dave, since at least 2012, 2013, tells you how long we've been around. And while there is always the will to put in a warming center at a church or at a volunteer location, there are building and health code requirements. You can't just put congregate overnight stay in a space. Also, depending on the nature of the clients that are there, you often need to have some security measures, showers, and things like that. So knowing that, and knowing that Shepherd House had been open and operating, I reached out to Anne Marie, and we talked about this, and I'm going to have her come up and talk about what she does, and then we can answer specific questions about it. And I want you to know we did not talk, but look it up.
I know. We were just talking about that.
Literally.
It's like twins.
Oh, wow. They were like-minded.
That's pretty cute.
Well, I'm a little bit shorter than she is, so I'm really excited to be here and to hopefully partner with the City of Kent for your residents and those individuals who are needing sheltering, not just during warm or cold weather, but also warm weather and just in general. So if this generates an opportunity for us to serve more individuals, we're really happy to do that. I want to talk a little bit about our intake services. On our regular guests that are coming in, we do an intake, we do a background check. Our number one issue is safety. We have women and children that are with us, and we want to make sure that they're going to be safe. We base each background check on an individual. If they haven't had anything in the last 5 years, and I'm referring to domestic violence and assault charges, then we can discuss that with them and see what they've been up to. So we do have an intake also for the warming center and the cooling center. Now the document I have with me tonight says cooling center, and we will update the warming center one. It basically just has the guest name, date of birth, age, phone number, and for statistical purposes, their ethnicity and race, if they're a veteran. And one of the reasons we do this is because not only can they stay there for that night, but we could also see what services that we could help them gain, such as Medicaid or food stamps, mental health counseling, and so then we ask about their most recent living situation, where they in a shelter, permanent housing? Do they have substance abuse? This helps us to see, again, what resources that we know that are available for them. So the way the shelter is set up, and I have a book with photos that I'm going to leave with Bridget so that you can check it out. And by all means, if you'd like to come and see it, just give me a call. I'd be happy to show it off. Anyway, so as you come in the door, we do have a metal detector. Again, it goes back to the S word, safety. And whatever backpacks or anything that they have with them, we inspect those. And that's whether it's the warming center, the cooling center, or our typical guests that's staying with us. And we go through that routine every single time they come in. So if we're not background checking, and we don't typically background check those for the warming center or the cooling center, unless they want to say, if they say, you know, I'd like to be permanent, not permanent, but be a guest here on a regular basis and partake in your services. So when they come in, there's a dining area, and I'm going to say a social area where there's a flat screen TV and books and games and things like that. So that's where we put our warming center guests. We have cots that we purchased some years before we even opened the shelter. So we make sure that they have clean linens every night that they're there, and a pillow and a blanket, and they have access to laundry services. The only difference between our regular guest and a warming center or cooling center guest would be they can't go back in the dorm areas unless they've had that national background check. And then again, it's safety. So, Bridget, have I left anything out?
No.
Oh, you're right.
And so Anne Marie and I was there. We were talking. We both have worked with this population for some time. And some of the ancillary issues that we need to discuss, of course, is that with the current guests that stay there for homeless services and the wraparound programs to get them into temporary or permanent supportive housing, they are actually not there during the daytime. They leave in the morning and they come back late afternoon. So the meals are breakfast, and then they come in the late afternoon, evening for dinner, and they do actually have assignments that they do before they're fed. With the warming center and the cooling center, those meals, all three meals are provided. They're basically allowed in the, I'm going to call it the common area, the front area. The dorms are actually off of that and cordoned off so that you can't get into that. So there's costs with providing those meals. There's indirect costs with additional utilities. We did talk that PARTA does offer free transportation to the warming center if that's where you're going. However, oftentimes, as Robin can speak to, your furnace doesn't go out necessarily during the daytime when the bus routes are running. So it would probably be reasonable to have some funds appropriated for ride share if needed. Emergency services such as the police and fire, when they come across a person who is homeless and living outside, they often will transport as well. But we really do need to cover all those bases. Second of all, we're a little bit shooting at a target without knowing, right? In this climate change environment, we can have periods of excessive cold, excessive heat. So we could have a winter where it's only needed 2 or 3, and another where if you remember the polar freeze we had just a couple years ago, it was about 14 days of that. So using that and looking at some of the funding I use for Miller House, I would like to say that while we do provide social service grant support, if this is a service the city wants to ensure that we can provide this for our residents, it needs to be a funded, not a competitive grant. And I don't come up here and say that often, but I know that if we're always going to be wondering whether or not, or if this program has to compete with others, that can be a challenge. So I would ask for appropriation. It's not going to be costly I would say maybe for a benchmark for appropriations for this first year, we look at potentially 8,000. Anne Marie and I will work together to look at those costs and figure out, like, looking backwards, and that'll give us a good benchmark. But again, it could change, right? We could find that 8,000 is a good number, and the next winter need it more. But I think that that's a good starting point. And I know that her and I have talked just even here, and when I was over at the facility, about different things, but I'm sure other things will come up. So we're more than willing to ask questions, but since this is important to council, they asked us, the administration, to bring this back, and because we do not have a location in the city to accommodate it, I do think that this is the best answer, and I can also tell you unequivocally, she runs one of the best agencies I've dealt with her for years, and she knows what she's doing, and not only in terms of her experience and time, but her commitment and compassion.
Any questions from council? Roger?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it takes special people to work with that population. I'm kind of curious, I have a couple questions. One, do you have any regular guests, you use that term, a guest on a regular basis, that are from Kent, Ohio? Are they?
Yes.
Okay,
we
so
do.
they've identified as
Oh,
their,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, many,
okay. So we have many that are already regular guests there. And
or have been.
Or have been, and then
Right, yeah.
they kind of graduate, is that, or?
I guess you could say that.
And
I mean, we like to think of it that way.
Yeah, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
That's our hope, right?
They're not repeats.
Yeah. Well, the other part of that question then is that as what we're talking about as a first step here, obviously, is that we're looking for that emergency warming kind of situation. And the difference between, if I'm trying to get this wrapped in my head, is that if they are there as a warming resident, then they're expected to leave during the day? Did I catch
No.
that? No, I
No,
wasn't.
not
that's what I
when
was
the
trying-
weather is cold.
So they will stay
Well,
there?
Yeah,
then?
which, as Bridget and I discussed, is an increase in our electricity, an increase in our staff
Right,
time
right,
or
right.
volunteer time and food cost as well. Yeah, no. I mean, now some choose to leave.
To go
I
out
mean,
and the
they
weather-
have that freedom.
Sure.
You know, but, no, they have the abilities to. And last year, I think we were open about 10 or 12 days. I mean, we had some cold times, yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say we had at least 20 people from the community, from Kent, Ravenna, and I want to say maybe Garrettsville. We had some
Actually
people.
made it down there to the, okay.
so, to clarify, so the guests that have in the dorms, the one that goes through the full security
Sure.
background check, they, under their programming, because they offer such wraparound services, they connect them with vocational services, educational services,
Right.
SNAP, everything that you can imagine. They leave during the day. The cooling center and the warming center are in the common area in the front. They don't go through that full check, and they are allowed to stay during those times of extreme heat or extreme cold. I should also mention that Center of Hope actually does, as well as KSS, Kent Social Services, does allow during daytime hours, during their operating hours, during cold, oftentimes they're only open for a meal, but during these cold periods, they will open in the morning and stay open until 4:30 or 5 at night, which is usually more than the one meal. They might be doing a, small type of breakfast item and allow them to stay. So we do have that, but the issue and concern that is usually the overnight, because that is when oftentimes the heat is out or an emergency situation happens, where this would then address that need.
Okay, just one last question then. How do we alert, or how do we make it known to any homeless population that
Oh,
this
that's a-
service is available?
That's a good question. Believe it or not, they have their phones, and they have Facebook on their phones, so.
Okay.
And just by word of mouth, I mean,
Yeah.
somehow, they
The
have a
network.
mode of communication. Hey, so-and-so's open today, or somebody's having a hot meal today. They manage to be able to get that information out to
Okay.
one another, so.
Okay.
They do
And-
that even when it's not warming center time.
Right.
Like meals, holidays, it's a network. I mean, it's an informal network that and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it runs between Ravenna and Kent, Kent to Ravenna, and all the small communities in in between.
Okay.
Right.
Those are the primary locations.
Well, I suspected as such, but,
And through law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
because the officers that are on the road and they see someone, they'll bring them in. And the other thing with our warming center is you don't have to be in there by a certain time. I mean, if the law enforcement brings somebody in at midnight, we'll take them in. We prefer that they be there by 8 p.m., but there are situations when a law enforcement officer will find someone that's freezing cold
Mhm.
and bring them in,
Mhm.
so.
okay. Thank you.
Heidi?
Yeah, thank you so much for what you do, Anne Marie. And I have had the pleasure of touring the facility, and it's really, really well laid out, clean, and it's just a top-notch facility. Just a quick question. Are we proposing to appropriate funds for just a warming center, or are we also talking about cooling? Because that could be pretty extreme, too.
I would say both. That 8,000 is a placeholder right now for budgetary for the cooling, and again, like I said, it's kind of a moving target because we don't know what winter or summer will bring. But that 8,000, and then if it turns out that we're into July, we're down, I would of course then be submitting an appropriations request to get us through the rest of the summer and the upcoming winter.
If I may just mention that we do not take HUD funding. We
Good to
we
know.
survive on private donations and grants.
Which is why general fund money is the source. I'm here before you because, as you know, I do work with the CDBG funds, and while this would be an eligible service, they don't take that federal resource. So the general fund, the local funds don't have some of those strings attached, for lack of a better word, the red tape that often goes with that. Like for Miller House, we give them $15,000 a year out of CDBG for the emergency shelter services, and I can tell you that is de minimis compared to what it actually costs for that. An average shelter night at Miller House is about $330. The domestic violence shelter, Safer Futures, which we also support through our local social service funding, is actually slightly higher than that, but it only has capacity for 4.
Robin?
Yeah, Ms. Noble, again, thank you for what you do. Greatly appreciate it. Having had to experience, as was brought up, a situation where you're in an emergency furnace or your fans or air conditioner goes out. What is the communications deficit? Do you view that as a real problem, people being able to communicate that they are in distress? How do we address that, and also the portability issue? Is there a possibility that we're able logistically to identify an area that we can determine already meets the qualifications for being able to
We are not going to base this on household income, which is why we're not doing HUD funding. By using general fund, there will be no determination. I mean,
No, I didn't mean it that way.
Okay.
I meant,
That's a good question.
by housing, I meant a building or church or someplace that you could, has been identified as meeting the qualifications to be able to do, not permanently, but
Actually, we've looked at that a lot, Robin. There is really no facility. Anything that they've tried to do, Kent Social Services, during their daytime normal hours, will act as a cooling and a warming center, but they do not do that past the evening. And part of that is there are security issues, and there's just certain services that it has to be full bathroom services. When you have congregate living, if you have heads and beds, is the way I always explain it, the rules and regulations grow exponentially. In addition, there's zoning code matters. We don't just let anyone have congregate living. We are a college town. We actually have a classification and designation for those. So we have looked at this literally for more than a decade, and there really isn't a facility that can accommodate it here. The churches have talked to us. You've got accessibility issues. You've got security issues. So this really is the most logical approach, and really all we need to do is ensure that we get the information out. What I would suggest is that in the utility billing, in the water bills that go out, we start listing that the City of Kent residents have ability for a free warming center, and then of course we'll change it to cooling center in the summer. That can go out in the monthly utility bills. We can put it on our social media. We can put it on our website. We will obviously, all the safety forces will be made aware, but there really isn't, and if there was a place in Kent, I swear I would have found it by now. If Anne Marie had not opened, if Shepherd House had not opened, we would still be in the same quandary. I'd be standing in front of you telling you that unless we build a facility or do an extensive renovation and reclassification at KSS in terms of capital improvements, we would not be able to accommodate.
If I could even jump in on that, Mr. Chairman, just, Robin, we had, I remember distinctly, it was exciting. I remember because it was exciting. We thought we were working with Mark and Kent Social Services and coming up with properties potentially that would include something like this. He was looking for kind of an all-in-one facility that had wraparound services, had all these. He was looking at the property at University Plaza. He looked briefly at the church property, which is, turning into senior living. Those were the only two that he felt.
He looked at the Marks property, the old top store.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What did I say? I said University Plaza. I meant the Marks
Yeah,
Plaza.
yeah.
Well, actually, he looked at both.
He did.
Because he looked at the grocery,
Right.
the closed grocery, the half of the building. Anyways, the point I was trying to make, despite my memory lapses, was that there has been a genuine, sincere desire and interest to try to find a facility that could work in Kent, and the experts like Mark working with us and Bridget just were not able to make something like that happen. So I don't want you to think there wasn't for lack of effort. It really was.
No, and I'll be honest with you, my focus wasn't on a permanent, it was on a portable.
Portable or temporary, you're still held to the same standards in terms of building code and zoning.
Then the issue becomes more a communications and transportation one.
And we can address those. Anne Marie and I actually here in our 5 minutes, we already came up with a plan. I mean, I'm going to contact PARTA. If the funding is appropriated by council, I will contact PARTA. We all know that Claudia and Brian Troutman are going to work with us on that. They've already provided free transportation services during normal bus route hours to Shepherd House. In addition, some of the appropriations we can dedicate for ride share, so that way then if calls come in to Shepherd House and somebody needs transport to the warming center, we can have Uber or Lyft or one of them get them there. So we'll make sure we coordinate all that, and between the two of us, we can figure out probably every scenario of what could possibly happen, and we'll have a plan A and B, and probably a C.
And probably dress alike again.
They're the team.
Further questions? Chris?
Thank you so much for your work. I thought I heard you mention this, but do you have an approximate number of heads and beds in the, I guess, differentiating out the more long-term population versus
we could accommodate 64 individuals in the actual sleeping quarters. We had this January that we had, I'm going to say between 20 and 24 folks that came in on a regular basis for the warming center.
that's each day?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's, again, the warming center is I really strongly advise everybody to reach out to Anne-Marie. There's pictures, but you really gotta see the facility. It is so clean and it is so logically laid out. But the warming center is completely cordoned off from the dorm areas. So that 64 and then the warming center is in addition too. So it's a lot, and the facility does not look that big, but it's organized so well that they maximize the space. And they actually have family units in there too. When I was there, there was a mom that had a homeless mom that had a child that was in a separate unit. So they are not in the actual female dorms and the male dorms.
And they also would have, I don't know if I mentioned, they would have access to laundry facilities as well.
Have there been, I guess, Bridget, this is for you, have there been, can you talk about how the ride share typically works?
Well, we haven't done it yet, but I'll figure it out. That's probably, that I don't think is gonna be too hard. What we'll probably do is, as many of these nonprofits work, and any of you that have worked with one will know, oftentimes they have, like with the nonprofit, they'll have like a card or petty cash or certain service. So we will just need proof of a receipt for the ride share that it basically came from a Kent address. So when we've done other things for like the social service funding, we offer legal aid gets assistance, and they just give us information on the address, not the resident's name, but the address that they serve. So we would do the same. A receipt from Uber showing a pickup out on Elm Street to there would be that would hold up to auditors. I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
I was noticing that when I use Uber, I look at Google Maps and I find the name and I type that into the destination. And I was looking, it's still called Haven in Portage County on the maps.
We have applied through the IRS to change our name. We did buy the name, the Haven of Portage County, so someone else couldn't pick it up. But we just did this the last part of September,
Okay.
so
sometime
the
for
IRS
transition.
isn't as fast as local government, so.
What we would probably do is list both, quite honestly, just especially for this first winter season, just have basically Shepherd House, also known as, so that way then when, yeah. And honestly, the ride share, and I'm not being derogatory in any way, but most of the people that are come to this ride share typically are not as savvy with using those types of apps. So it'll most likely be a contact to, you can correct me if I'm wrong, to Shepherd House, and then Shepherd House would be calling the Uber or the ride share to get that person picked up there and brought in, because they would also be the one that would be taking care of that, whether it's an online payment through a Shepherd House credit card or whatever, taking care of that. So it wouldn't actually necessarily be the resident taking care of that, because we really couldn't have the residents using their own Uber to get there and then us reimbursing them. We could never do that without there, so it'd have to be coordinated through that. I'll talk to Anne Maria those details and her staff, but I would think those calls would need, if it was middle of the night, would need to come. And we also could potentially, you know, if depending on where they're at or that kind of stuff, we might be able to work with our emergency services too. I'll have those conversations with Nick and Jamie.
Based on what you said too, if I could, it seemed somewhat possible that if they're hanging out in Kent Social Services in the afternoon and the clock's getting close to closing time, they could arrange for transport of any of those people that wish to go. They're going to need further after the KSS closes, that they could coordinate that, I would think, with your office.
Yeah.
I work very closely with Marquise. I actually hired her. So we work quite close together, and she'll call and say, I have so-and-so, and yeah.
And then with PARDA willing to make that transport during those times that you're referencing, Dave, that would be, the ride share really would be the backup for the anomaly. Because if it's a resident that already knows they're out with heat, they're probably already at a facility during the day, but we will have a few at night, and I just want to have that backup. Because we need to know what, maybe we won't need it, but if it's one or two, I'd rather have that backup and know we have that ability to do that.
Further questions? Heidi?
Yeah, I know that from working on grants for the city, that a lot of people say they live in Kent, but they don't necessarily live in Kent. They live outside of Kent, but because it's the greater Kent area. So what I'm seeing this as, Anne Marie's not going to turn anybody away, but for those people that actually do have a Kent verifiable Kent residents, there would be a reimbursement of some kind. That way, that would ensure that the program is viable. But we could also talk to Franklin Township maybe about, seeing the success of this. Maybe there'd be other communities that would be also willing to do this kind of subsidy.
We actually do that with, I'll use Community Legal Aid actually. So they service the entire county, and they will, identify ones that are in Kent, and occasionally they're from Franklin or Brimfield Township. But I can tell you, and it's probably going to be this way, but the need usually outweighs, and there's enough Kent residents that off the list from Community Legal Aid, of the 80 they give me, 50 are Kent kind of thing. So it's probably going to be similar, not many of those high numbers, but we're going to have, it will be many Kent resident addresses, I'm sure. And we would verify that in our office. We do that with our other grants.
And a homeless person, how would they have an address?
Well, they don't.
Exactly.
One of our things is we ask for a photo ID, and oftentimes they don't have one. So I bought one of those small Polaroid cameras, and so we take their photo. And the way we identify whether they're a regular guest or if they're a warming center guest, the warming center guests have to wear a red wristband. I bought some wristbands. And then regular guests wear yellow wristbands. That way we can determine who's going where, and if they're going into the dorm area, we can, you're not going in there, you don't have the right wristband, so.
I would like to add too, we actually have that at Miller House. Miller House is the emergency homeless shelter, and Safer Futures is the domestic violence shelter. If they are housed in Kent, they're under even HUD, they are considered Kent resident. If it's a Kent service that we're providing, everybody that comes into Miller House did not live in Kent prior, but they're in Miller House now, they're in Kent, so we're taking care of them. So it's similar in nature. If they're homeless and one of Jamie's crew brings them in from under the bridge or by the railroad in Kent, I'm going to call that a Kent, the pickup was in Kent. So to me, that's Kent.
Got it.
Okay.
The other thing we have to consider is the confidentiality of the individual.
Yeah.
So that's, in addition to safety, we really guard an individual's identity.
And actually, it is listed as confidential in the HUD reports that we do. We can do an address, but we don't actually put names. And actually, when it's the domestic violence, we actually don't even put the address. The facility is not identified in any way.
Roger?
Yeah, maybe you've answered this in a way. So the ride share and those type of, the transportation issues are basically for the anomaly of not being able to pick that. What would be the difficulties in possibly having 3 or 4 volunteers? I see that you're always looking for volunteers. Could there be a volunteer ride share? People
you mean
who,
a volunteer to pick someone up?
yeah, and deliver them?
I wouldn't send them by themselves. I would make sure that 2 people went. Again,
Okay.
it's safety. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what their
Right,
mental health
right.
status is.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to put anyone at jeopardy. I really discourage my volunteers, and they always break the rules.
Yeah.
I really discourage them from taking a guest from point A to point B, but they do it. I turn my back, and
So if someone was interested in offering volunteer on an emergency basis, the concern would be their security, not necessarily the person. So if we get a call
Say
from the
both,
police station, or both,
because
I
you don't know
guess.
if they're picking, if
Yeah.
a guy's picking up a young lady.
Yeah,
We don't, again, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
actually one of the reasons why the churches, when they had volunteered and wanted to basically put cots in
oh, sure, sure.
communal areas, and we would go through this, there's a lot of co-occurring issues, and even if it's someone whose furnace just goes out, that is fine, but I can tell you, we do rental licensing. There are people that, even though they may not present at a
Correct.
facility like Coleman, when you see the inside, some mental health concerns there, and so picking them up and then putting them in, there's just too many unknowns.
Well, wouldn't that be
So-
true, Bridget, with rideshare and Uber and all that too?
They're insured though.
See, I always knew there was it's that red tape, right? Okay.
I'm going to share with you, I just had recently, one of my male volunteers was transporting a female guest to her job, and all of a sudden he said, I can't do this anymore. So I don't know what transpired there, and I'm not sure I want to know, but, yeah, so.
No, that makes sense though, unless they were really insured
Yeah,
heavily.
yeah. Good thought, though.
Chris?
I love volunteers. I exist on
I
volunteers.
saw you light up when I said volunteer.
Chris?
They always use volunteers at the facility.
Chris?
Yeah, just two more quick questions. So these Parta rides, those are free?
Currently, yes.
They were
If-
last year.
Okay.
If-
We would need to confirm that with PARTA again.
Every year I confirm it. When I was at the Center of Hope, this is when I opened the first warming center, and we had volunteers that came in through the night. The drawback was somebody had to sit at the table and put their head down, but they were warm and they got food. Because we were we not only did meals for for free, but we also, in the back of the building, we had home-delivered meals, which was funded, so there was a technicality there as far as somebody sleeping, we couldn't put cots up at that time, so, yeah.
I only asked that because at a, not to put Joan on the spot, we touched base on this a while back, and I think there's some confusion about if the Parta rides are free. I had heard that maybe
The way the Parta rides are free, I contact Parta and say, okay, we're going to be open as a warming center, and Parta will transport the individual for free if they say they're going, excuse me, if they tell the Parta driver that they're going to the shelter. Not the regular shelter, but the warming center shelter.
Okay, so
Then
they
there's
have to be
no-
explicit that they're going to
Right,
the warming center.
going to the warming center.
So if they say I'm going to Shepherd House,
Yeah, that's,
that wouldn't-
I mean, yeah,
That
would
would
be,
count.
yeah, that would
so
count.
the driver would have some education to know that Shepherd House equals.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Hey,
And then-
oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, and then last question is just what's the next step for from
Well,
us?
funds are appropriated for this. Anne Marie and I will start working out the logistics. It'll be, obviously, we'll have Shepherd House track costs, and then we'll reimburse after we get a sense of those costs. But, once we know that the funding has been approved for this use, we would work on structuring the project,
Thank you.
or program, I should say.
Further questions? Anybody from the audience? Robin, you have another question? No. Okay. Back to, this is just informational, correct? We don't need to make any action?
Oh.
Okay.
You want the motion for the,
Want a motion
we do
for
need an
$8,000.
appropriation.
Bud?
Yeah, there's no action.
No
If you
action.
want to appropriate
Oh,
funds,
okay.
This would be the time
Well,
for council
okay.
to consider that.
Roger's got his hand up there.
Well,
Well,
Robin
Robin
had
is first. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to move the $8,000 request from
Okay.
Bridget.
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Chris. Any discussion?
Could-
Roger?
I just like, maybe this is inappropriate for discussion, but is $8,000 enough?
Yeah.
If not, I will be back.
Yep, she
We'll-
said-
I feel like
Because it's going to work, that she will then build the
We'll
city.
be in close communication, and as she's
Okay.
tracking those costs, she'll be submitting draw requests for that,
Okay.
and then we will know if it's an extreme winter and it's coming down, I will be submitting, but if this program is appropriated and funded, I can do that through an appropriations
Got it.
memo that goes through budget and finance.
Got it.
And it'd be great to get an update
Yeah,
how things are
absolutely.
going. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
And sorry, I talked during the motion.
Okay.
Well, I asked a question during the motion.
All right, we're good.
Should have called
See,
for
we-
the board.
we break the rules,
Thank
too.
you very much, and I'm really excited to be able to work with the city of Kent.
Yeah, I'd
Thank
say.
you.
Us too.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item on my agenda is City of Kent Police, Kent State University Police Mutual Aid contract, and that's Chief Scherer.
Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. So I'm just here, every 4 years, we have to renew our mutual aid agreements with Kent State University Police Department. It's an ORC, Ohio Revised Code requirement. They can only enter into mutual aid agreements for a period of 4 years. So this is just kind of more of a housekeeping measure. There is a minor change to our mutual aid agreement this time around. We have what's called a joint patrol district, and most of you may be familiar with our joint patrol district. It's something that's come before you in the past. Our joint patrol district used to extend north of East Main Street out to Crane Avenue. And what we found over the years is that portion of the joint patrol district has really never been utilized. So Kent State requested that we shrink the joint patrol district to no longer include that area. So essentially, it will just include the areas that are adjacent to campus. So Willow Street, Lincoln Street, Summit, and that part of East Main Street, but not north of East Main any longer. So really what the mutual aid agreement does is just give us the ability to draw Kent State off campus, to really give us extra resources if and when needed. Where it's really utilized the most, quite frankly, isn't so much on a need base for us, but we'll bring them off campus a lot of times just to document student behavior for their student conduct processes. So that's really where it comes into play the majority of the time. But again, this is just a request to extend the mutual aid agreement that's been in place a long time, and it's just more of a housekeeping measure for the next 4 years.
Questions? Heidi?
So, the documenting the behavior, that kind of caught my ears here, because I do know that in some of these neighborhoods that are, we call it edge neighborhoods, like on North Willow Street, for example, but there are some other areas that would be kind of, they're vulnerable. There's, a lot of students. There's a mix of people.
Mm-hmm.
Are these areas, like when you said Willow Street, are you talking about North Willow Street? Are you talking about the Willow Street that just goes by the architecture building? Or are we talking about Sherman? I'm just wondering,
Yeah, so there's two different things contained in the agreement. There's the Joint Patrol District, and the Joint Patrol District essentially gives Kent State University Police Department original jurisdiction to take action without us requesting them. That's what the Joint Patrol District is. The mutual aid agreement itself gives us the ability to request them anywhere in the city of Kent. It doesn't have to be anywhere near campus. It could be all the way out on the far west side of the city. So we have the ability to call them for help anywhere.
Okay, that's good to know.
Roger?
Yeah, Chief, mutual means that they can call us if they need help up on campus.
Yes, and really and truly, we don't need a mutual aid agreement for that because
It's in
the
the
university is contained within the
Right.
city. So this is, it sounds maybe bad to say, but this is actually way more of a benefit to us than it is to them.
Okay. Further questions? Anybody from the audience? Back to council?
I would move, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Okay. I would like to move to approve the updated mutual aid contract.
With the
between-
emergency.
With
With the emergency, yep.
Second. Second by Robin. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That's all from Health and Public
Thank you.
Safety.
Okay, moving into community development. Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes, Bridget is coming on up to discuss the West River parking lot agreement update. Hi,
Yes,
Bridget.
this is really a housekeeping item. A lease agreement was put in place 20 years ago, actually, when they did the West River redevelopment. So West River Medical Building was constructed and is utilized by Dr. Husting and other medical facilities. So he owns the building, but the city still owns the lot. So through the lease agreement, Dr. Hussing and the other medical professionals and patients use a lot during the business hours in the day, and then the city uses it for parking in the evenings and on weekends. The lease expired. It was time to update it. I will say that in the prior lease, it was we did a maximum of $2,500 to assist with the plowing and the landscaping consistently. That bill always came in around 10, so Dr. Hussing's LLC was actually absorbing most of that. So I did increase it to not to exceed $5,000, and it's basically half of whatever his costs are, up to $5,000, and on average it would have been about $4,800. So that's the only change from the prior one. The version you're going to see attached to the ordinance does have under the first section, it's enumerated. Hope had it it made it clear by putting it numbered, but the material and the information and text is exactly the same.
Questions from council? All right, questions from the audience? No? All right, back to council.
Move to approve with emergency.
All right. Second. All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, moving on, streets and sidewalks, Mr. Sidoti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First up, we have Jim coming up to talk to us about the 2024 capital projects update.
So for the newbies among us, let me just kind of let you know what we found is really helpful. The cap plan is, wow, it's got so many layers, so much detail, and sometimes it's easy to kind of get lost in all the numbers and all that. It's a great planning document, but the planning is done to produce results, right? And what we found is this was a great time for Jim each year, before we actually dive into the numbers of the cap plan, so to speak, to just give you a catch-up. What happened last year based on the funding you approved for this year previously, kind of gives you a sense of the continuity. A lot of, as Jim likes to say, most of these projects, I mean, they're 5, 6, 7 years from start to finish, sometimes longer. So you'll see it in a cap plan in an out year, and it'll stay for a long time. It's not to say Jim is slow. It's just to say that these types of projects are very deliberate, methodical, and as you've seen with East Main Street, you've had the planning and engineering phasing, you had the right-of-way acquisition phasing, and each of those almost take a year in themselves. So anyways, I think you'll get a feel for the tempo of these projects. But I told Jim, it's really important to celebrate the good work that gets done. This is like a one time of the year that we kind of sit back and let Jim kind of talk us through it. And I know it's not, all as sexy as downtown projects, but the work that we've done at our utility plants and the streets and so forth are probably equally as important to the quality of life.
Yes.
Nothing says bad quality of life like failing sewer. So in that context, that's what Jim's going to start with. We will get to the cap plan. Actually, he'll step away and we'll bring Rhonda up later. We'll get to the cap plan. So this is kind of just your annual review, reflection back of what we've accomplished. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dave. We're going to try this time to get the engineer and me out of the trees for a little bit, and we want to look down in the forest to get that big picture, because like Dave said, infrastructure is long-term. Things we start today, they'll come to fruition in 5 to 10 years. The residents don't notice it because they just see something happening all the time, right? But they were all started years ago as deliberate thought is gone into it. And, the residents of Kent benefit from council's overriding and consistent focus on the capital plan and on the long-term vision for the city. So looking at the forest, the long-term vision, did I turn it on? Not yet. There we go. Wow. Do it this way. Okay. The long-term vision of the city to be the city of choice in Northeast Ohio for residents, businesses, and students seeking enriching community experiences that will last a lifetime. And we do that through the strategic values, all those that are up there, quality of life, safe community, and capital investments can impact all of these strategic values at some way, shape, or form. So, keeping that in mind, I'm going to talk about this in sort of two areas. One is the city utilities, and then the other area is the city right-of-ways, the things on the surface that everybody sees and interacts with more specifically. And in the utilities, we're in a time of significant investment in the sewer and water areas right now. It's not that storm and solid waste don't have investments going on right now, and we still have to buy leaf trucks for the solid waste, those that get picked up, but just in the age of our sewer infrastructure and our water infrastructure, we have to, as Dave mentioned, we have to protect the environment. We don't want to see a sewer breaking and spilling into the environment. So in the sewer fund, you guys, those who were on council last year saw this table looking at, it's over $43 million worth of necessary improvements at the water rec facility and also in the sewer system. Now, what we've done in 2024, since that, now getting back into the trees, we've completed the Yacovona Pump Station decommissioning. For those who know, that's sort of the companion project for the Middlebury Road Pump Station. There were 2 pump stations in that area. Now we're down to 1. Okay, so this project, it demolished the Yacovona Pump Station and built the sanitary sewer that connected to the new pump station built. So now we only have 1 to maintain, and there's a lot less maintenance on a sanitary sewer than there is on a pump station. The next project that was completed this year was the final clarifiers at the water rec facility. These are 60-foot diameter concrete tanks, okay, with mechanical equipment, and what they do is they clean out the solids and the floatables from our wastewater, okay. This was intended to be done in 2 phases, this project, because we didn't have the money to do them all at once. However, due to availability of funding through state ARPA money, through OPWC money, and local ARPA money, we accelerated the second phase, combined them, and bid it out together, and completed that this last year. So out of a total $2.83 million, we ended up paying for $30,000, basically, and all said and done.
That's great.
Another project that started this year is the #1 primary clarifier rehabilitation. For those who were here about 6 years ago, this all started when the #2 primary clarifier had a mechanical failure, and the fail-safes failed, and the entire clarifier was damaged to and it was inoperable. Okay, so then we had an emergency repair to fix that, and of course, emergency repair in our realm is it took 1.5 years to get done. So there's 6 clarifiers at the plant now. After this #1 primary clarifier gets done, all will have been rehabilitated. This project has brought $1.1 million, and we got 40% of that funded through state Ohio Public Works funding. The next project, the digester heat exchangers, now that's been on the plan for a long time. The heat exchangers basically take heat and methane byproducts from the treatment process. They take it and they convert it back into energy and put it back into the treatment plant. Okay, so part of this project is to build a separate building for the boilers and the electrical controls to move them away from the heat exchangers. They found that since it was built in the 80s that it's unsafe to have those electrical controls in the same room with the heat exchangers. So this project is $7.2 million. $7 million of this is funded through either OPWC or local ARPA funding, and it's expected to be completed in October of next year. So where does that put us in that chart? So now we have 3 projects completed, 2 more under construction. That's totaling over $16 million that either is completed or in construction right now. You know, when I was putting this together, I remember in 2020 sitting in my dining room having this meeting and this update with everybody, and the first time showing all these needs. And if someone would have told me in 2020, when we only had $250,000 available for construction, that we were going to have $16 million done or completed in 4 years, I'd have said they had too many gummies. So, so we're making great progress in the sewer system. However, there's still a lot to be done. Okay, there is $40+ million worth of work that needed to be done. Right now, we're working on the headworks renovation. The design phase of that starts in 2025. Relocating the sewer that goes along the Cuyahoga River. We're in the planning phase right now, trying to find a way to reduce that $18 million or phase it in some way and get the most out of that money. So that's in the process, in the plan for next year as well. So moving from sewer to water, for those who came to the 100th anniversary, this slide's from there. It's really quick, but just to give you a view of what our water system includes, we have a well field with 5 wells. Actually, we just put the 5th well back in service in 2023. From the wells, we pump the water to the treatment plant, which treats the water, puts it through the distribution system that gets it to the residents. So the area that we are working at right now is the well field. Okay, as I mentioned, we have 5 wells in service right now. If one goes down, there's concern. If 2 goes down, there's serious concerns. So we're looking to increase capacity and redundancy, basically, in the system of wells that are over 50 years old. So now the steps it takes to do that, first you have to find a groundwater source, and this is through research, ODNR well logs, things like that. You also have to make sure that the groundwater source isn't near any potential contaminants. Unfortunately, we've seen that in the news in Ohio not too long ago. Once we have that, you drill a few wells, smaller wells, to see how deep you have to go. Do you find water? Okay, were you expecting to find it? The well field has been discussed and worked on since before I got here in Kent in 2007. So there was an agreement with Portage County Water Resources that's almost 20 years old now, saying they're going to jointly look for new water sources. So this is not a short-term venture. But we have 2 locations that we've done the first 2 steps. Okay, they are fairly good locations. They may produce between 1 and 2 million gallons a day between the 2 of them, hopefully. Just to give you some order of magnitude, we on average use 2.6 million gallons a day in the city of Kent. So the next step is what I call a more robust well testing, okay, and that's in the capital plan for 2025. This consists of basically drilling the well itself, 20-inch diameter well, and then drilling monitoring wells around it, and start pumping for days at a time and seeing how much water you can consistently draw. Because we're not talking about drilling a well for a home. We're looking for something that's going to supply up to 30,000 people water consistently. So depending on the results of this test, we're either starting design and moving into construction, or we're going back to the beginning and finding another source that may be available. So that is a significant venture in the water side, and next year is going to be a big year. We're hoping that those 2 well sites can produce significant water for the city. So now moving on to the areas in the right-of-way. And again, in this one, I'm going to break it into 2 different categories as well. One is maintaining what we have. Okay, that's the street and sidewalk program. That's those things that we're just trying to keep things going, and it's working well now. It's just getting old and needs to be refreshed. The other thing we're going to talk about is improving on what we have. This is where you know, the infrastructure is just not quite serving the same needs or desires that it was intended to at the beginning, or times have changed some. Okay, the difficult part about this is what is improving? You know, what's improving to Melissa may be different to Gwen and be different to Jeff, and that's really a struggle. We get our guidance on this from the bicentennial plan that was done in 2003, 2004. They had a section specifically on transportation, and in it they had 10 different features or characteristics that they felt, goals that the community was looking for, that they got from a significant amount of public outreach. Okay, and when we do these significant projects, we're out talking to the public. We have citizens advisory committees. We have public meetings, and over my tenure here, every time we have these meetings, those values keep coming back. The values haven't changed any. They're still looking for pedestrian orientation to our right-of-ways. They don't want to add capacity. They want to manage the traffic, okay? They want to make sure everything moves, okay, but they don't want to put a sea of asphalt out there, okay? They want to protect the neighborhoods. Going back, as Roger talked about earlier, the bridge project, the 2009 to 2012, a big hang-up on that was to protect the Crane Avenue neighborhood from traffic that was cutting through at that time. Before we built the project, it was 10,000 cars a day that were going down Crane Avenue, and after it was done, it's dropped to 4,500 cars a day. It really shows how much impact we could have on the community by what we're doing in the right-of-way. Preserving Kent's small-town atmosphere is another one. Like I mentioned, there's 10 of them. One thing that wasn't in the plan, in the bicentennial plan, but we hear all the time, is safety. And it's not just the actual, is there crashes? There's data that shows that. It's the perception of safety. They want to feel safe. They want to feel safe when they drive. They want to feel safe when they're walking across the street. They want to feel safe for their children playing in the area. So all of these things go back to, and in the right-of-way, touches all those strategic values in the city in that long-term vision. So this year, projects that we've gotten done, the Sunrise Boulevard Bridge rehabilitation. For those who don't know, Sunrise Boulevard, small street on the west end of town. It's a dead-end street with a cul-de-sac. This bridge provides access to 19 homes, okay? So we had to replace the entire superstructure. Superstructure, what is that? Sorry, that's an engineering term. That is basically take the beams off, take the deck off, and all you have are two walls, and then you put the beams back on and the deck back on. So, unfortunately, like this job here, we started probably 6 or 7 years ago. We submitted for funding. We're not successful. Then submitted again for funding. We're successful the second time, and then they give you the funding 4 years later. So then you have to go through the processes to get those done. So, project $620,000, but 95% of it is funded through the municipal bridge program. It should be completed in December. As I mentioned, it's on a cul-de-sac street, so you got to maintain traffic. Somehow you got to build it half at a time so that people can still get to their homes. And if you recall, we've had residents come in complaining about the condition of Sunrise, the road, and we agree. It's one of the worst streets in the city, but we had to delay working on the street until the bridge could get done. So, and if you recall, earlier this year, we submitted for OPWC funding for that. Currently, it looks very positive that we'll receive that funding. It's not official yet, but that will allow us to work on that, the design and the construction, hopefully on that next year. Now to the annual street and sidewalk program. This year's program is $1.8 million, and just to put that in perspective, when I came here in 2007, 2008, the program used to be $600,000, and it would be for two out of 3 years. It wasn't every year. So this is 3 times the size. Unfortunately, being 3 times the size, being managed by the same individual person, by the time the project was ready to go, it was a little too late in the year to bid, okay, because we wouldn't have enough contractors to bid on it. So it's ready to go, and we're going to bid it in February of next year to be done next year. Now, that doesn't mean that significant work wasn't done on the streets this year, because we were finishing last year's program that didn't all get done. So you see up there, there's 12 streets that were significant pavement repairs were done, seal coat, we crack sealed streets. We also ended up dealing with what I'll call a couple of the chronic areas, or we're going to be dealing with a couple of chronic areas. These are streets that their pavement condition, structural condition was strong and fine, but its rideability, its look was very bad. I'm speaking of Portage Street right now. So this year, we took probably 3 or 4 weeks in the beginning of the year to try to address Portage Street. Now, we didn't want to pave over the brick, and we were uncertain that if we milled off the brick, what the condition was going to be underneath. So we had no idea. That asphalt was placed before I came here 17 years ago. So there are stories that they're big ruts, but we really don't know. We don't even know if we milled it, how well it's going to come off. So we set aside a certain amount of money. We hired a contractor, came out, and they started milling it off, and then we repaired the brick areas that we could, and then when we got to that dollar amount, we stopped. And we buttoned up the road. We got rid of the problem, which the problem was 1.5 inch high chunks of asphalt were peeling off. So if you can imagine, you get a pothole in an asphalt street, our crews go out, they put some hot mix in it, they fill it up, and they tamp it down, and we move on, right? Well, this is like 1.5 inch lip over the entire length that you just can't put hot mix down and cover it up. So it turned out turned out very well. I mean, we've got over 60% of the asphalt off the street, and the brick's is in good condition, and it's smoother than it was before. It's still a brick street, so it's never going to be smooth. And that asphalt patch hopefully will last as long as the last one did. So the other area that we're starting to work, actually they started on today, is the joints along Lake Street. So for some reason, a section of Lake Street that was built, the concrete just keeps eroding away. We've put some special type of joint mix in to try to solve the crack that created, but then the concrete that adhered to crumbled away. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to cut out a couple feet of concrete and then put down new concrete in that joint. The hope is, I shouldn't say this sincerely, the hope is that the concrete that we cut into doesn't degrade as well. Okay, if it's solid, then the repair will hold and we'll be fine. But if the concrete's bad through and through, we're going to have problems long term in dealing with Lake Street. So, and replacing a concrete street is very costly. Yes.
That was going to be my question, because I know that concrete streets are of the past, and they have all these unique issues that come up, but they're so expensive to replace. What would replace it, like asphalt?
So there's a couple different ways of fixing. One, you could just tear it all out and put in whatever you want, right? Asphalt street back in. There are other methodologies like Rockwell Street. We redid that not too long ago, where you basically you grind off a little bit of the concrete, you put down a seal coat layer, and then fabric, and then you put down asphalt over top. Any of these these treatments are very expensive to just solve the problem that's out there. So let's put it this way. To solve that problem may cost us about as much as we're paying for East Main Street for our own funds. So, what's that?
All of East Main Street?
Yeah.
New project?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, while we don't like what's out there right now, and it's very frustrating, we're trying to find that middle ground solution that solves the problem, which is the crack, the joints, and not try to. The only sure way to do that is to replace the whole thing. So, there's not always good answers. So, and that's why some of these things take time, and we're deliberate about it. So now we're going to move from projects that are maintaining what we have to things that are improving on what we have. So one here is Walnut Street's reconstruction. This is the second phase of Walnut, and actually it's this, venture, if we want to call it, with community development, started 15 years ago. okay, in the south end. So we've done 2 blocks of pine, 2 blocks of cedar, now 2 blocks of walnut. The street and sidewalk program's done Dodge and Harris. Now if you go down to that area, you can see a marketed difference. And this represents 15 years of commitment by council to continue using the CDBG funds in some fashion to keep making incremental improvements here. So this project replaced the pavement and added curb, sidewalk, and storm sewer, which didn't exist there before in this area. The construction cost, as you see, is about a little under $500,000 with the CDBG funds funding the majority of that at $400,000. I don't get to say this very often. Here's a project that we spent no money on. Okay, so this is a project, a joint project with the Summit Metro Parks to connect the Freedom Trail and the Portage Hike and Bike Trail down at Middlebury Road. Initially, the Metro Parks, they were going to build most of this in Summit County, okay, but they couldn't acquire the land. So in talking to the director of planning, said, well, why don't you come into Kent, you can use the right-of-way, and then we can make the connection. And they agreed to do that. And so what you see there in the bottom left corner, there's going to be a series of switchbacks to go up from the Portage Hike and Bike Trail next to Middlebury Road up to the level of the bridge, and then they're going to put a new bridge next to the roadway bridge to cross over CSX track. They're going to go a little way, then they're going to turn and go over the crosswalk to their new parking lot that they built. So this is a great project. It's a significant amount of calls come in. Can't you do something about that? Yes, for a few $1 million, which is what this is, something can be done. It was delayed a little bit, a year or so, because of dealing with the railroad, getting approvals from CSX. But it's in construction now, and their current schedule has them opening in the spring.
Wow. Cool.
So now we're going to look forward into 2025 with East Main Street starting construction. We wanted to show you a few things, give you some information for questions that you might get asked from the public, at least from an overview standpoint. And you always feel free to refer them to myself or the engineering division to answer any detailed questions. But I think some of what we're going to show you is like how we're going to build this over the next 3 years. So, and if you recall, when we started this, the first public meeting we had on this was in December of 2017 in this room, okay? This project represents over $23 million of outside funding coming to the city, none of which is a loan. All of it is a grant or some other type of funding. So the basic premise, also one other thing, when we started this process, if you remember, East Main Street was the worst crash corridor in our region being all of Summit and Portage County and part of Wayne County, okay? So we're building a boulevard, basically, from Kent Central Gateway entrance all the way past Horning Road. And yes, there are roundabouts on it, but there's also 3 traffic lights staying, so, and being improved. So a couple images here I want to show you may not have seen. When working with the Citizens Advisory Committee and the stakeholders and others, they wanted to make sure coming into Kent from the east, they wanted a gateway feature. You know, when you start talking to residents about this, aesthetics come out to the fore. You know, they want their community to look nice. They want to live in a nice place. Okay, they want that small town feel, and they want it to be a great feel. So the roundabouts present an opportunity to for something special in that area. So what's shown up here is the treatment that's going to be done. There's 2 walls in the center that says, "Welcome to Kent, home of Kent State University." They wanted tall shade trees to represent the Tree City aspect of Kent. We still maintain the proper sight distance so people can see cars that go around in through there. That's Horning Road, And then at the other roundabout at Willow, Haymaker, and Main, this one provided another unique opportunity, just being its location, sort of this point where a lot of things come together downtown and the university. So there's a wall that goes around the center. In that wall, there's going to be some cast figures sort of representing the city of Kent, sort of like when you drive down the interstate, you see the sound walls and then you see images. The idea is that there's going to be 6 or 7 images that anyone driving around it will be able to at least resonate with one of them and say, yes, that is part of who we are. So though the images shown up there were just ideas, they are not necessarily the ones that are going to be up there in the end. We did get one of the comments from the Citizens Advisory Group to have the Kent High School symbol on there, and we thought that was a good comment. We've talked to the schools, and we'd like to incorporate that in it. So now, going into how we're going to build this. So this project's going to be built in 2 sections, okay? We're going to split it in half. We're going to do the eastern section first, from Luther east, and then the second section will go from Luther west to the beginning of the project near the Kent Central Gateway. Each section is going to be built in phases, okay? We can't shut the road down. We got to maintain traffic. We got to keep moving cars, providing access to properties. So the first phase is going to be where traffic's going to be running on the north side of the road towards the businesses, and we're going to build the south side on the Kent State side and on Kent State's property. Once that phase is done, we're going to go to the second phase where we then move cars to the asphalt that was just put down, plus some existing asphalt and temporary asphalt, and we'll run 3 lanes on that side. And at that point, we'll be building the north side of the road, okay? Then once that's done, we're going to basically having traffic run on either side of the work, and then we're going to build the median in the center. Under this phase, if you recall, the roundabouts will be done by this time. Okay, so that people trying to get to where they want to go will either be able to turn at one of the intersections, the signalized intersections, or they'll go around the roundabout to turn. It's the beginning of what they're going to see when it's all done with the access management that was extremely important in improving safety in this corridor. So then, Section 1, Luther East, done in 3 phases. And that's probably going to be start in 2025, take all of 2026, and then after that, in 2027, move to the western side, and then that's going to be done in 2027 and probably spill off into 2028. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry, Roger.
Roger, go
I
ahead.
see you now, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So you said, you just kind of said in passing that the roundabouts are going to be built first.
No,
No.
they'll be built before the third phase.
Before the third phase.
For
So-
at least for the section that we're doing. So it'll be allow them to do a U-turn so that we can maintain access across. We always have to maintain access.
So the section, eastern section, Luther East, will be the roadway and then the roundabout? People want to know this. so
Yeah,
I'm-
sure,
I'm
no
trying to be
problem.
specific.
This section, Luther East, going from Luther all the way to the eastern end of the project near the church. And we'll build all 3 phases. And when that's done,
The south, the north, the roundabout.
yeah, south
then-
and north. Roundabout's going to be sort of done in the mix with this because those have their own phases.
Okay.
That's fairly detailed. I didn't memorize all that before I came here. I apologize for it. The plans are only 460 sheets long, so.
Right.
But yes, but the idea being, in that third phase where they're building the median, they will have access to the properties across the street. That is
Yes.
really the key.
Mm.
That's a good question. It's extremely important throughout construction to make sure we communicate what's going on. We learn that, well, we've learned that over the years. And the approach to communication is everything. every different method possible, whether it's static locations like the website where you're going to see, here's what the job is, here's what we're doing, or it's going to be email updates to adjacent property owners, and if we miss anybody, I'm going to be upset this time, or anyone who asks to be to let them know, hey, next week they're going to be doing this, okay? And for any of those who aren't looking at social media or looking at websites, if they're just driving, there's going to be 4 changeable message boards placed throughout the project, and they move at different times, letting the drivers know, here's the changes, here's what's going on. So, and frankly, anything else that anyone can come up with that seems like be a good way to do it, okay? In today's day and age, we have to get information to the public in their basic media of choice. So,
Wow.
now if you remember, okay, I'm going to go back into the weeds a bit, sorry for this.
Would you like to ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just a comment, which is, I think what you're doing now is obviously a public good. I think this is a really nice explanation. I hope that maybe we can get the slide deck uploaded to our website so that we can send this recording, from minute 90 to 180, you'll hear the comprehensive presentation on, the all the improvements, and then we can maybe link somehow to the slide deck.
Sure.
And they can,
Yeah.
because I think having some kind of evergreen, long-form explanation would be really good for folks. Because oftentimes the question is, what are they doing? And message board is just going to be a quick, social media. If we can have some kind of if you really want to spend 2 hours.
There'll be a website
Here
with
you
all
go.
of that on it. There
Great.
already is one now.
Yeah.
But it'll morph into a construction website, so
Right.
that kind of-
Yeah, I appreciate a simplified
Mhm.
explanation. For it.
Great.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to apologize for this ahead of time because this is sort of the engineer in me. The idea that, we're doing this to make the community safer, okay? And we've been doing this now for a fairly long time. Council's been very committed to the concepts that were in the bicentennial plan and these projects. So what we did was we looked at total crashes in the city of Kent this goes back from 2012 to 2023, okay? The blue line is the crashes in the city of Kent. In 2012, there were 602 crashes in the right-of-way in the city of Kent. In 2023, there was 460. Represents a 25% reduction over those years. Now, that could be from many things. Let's be honest. A lot goes on, that affect this kind of thing. So we said, well, to benchmark this, let's look at our region, which has a lot of those things. So vehicle miles traveled are going down. Everyone's gone through COVID. That's the orange line in the top, okay? In Kent, we're trending down faster than in the region. And when I say faster, I'm going to say it's significantly faster. Our line, this is the engineer in me, our line would approach 0 in a third of the time that the region would. Okay? Now, that's affected by COVID and other things, but we also looked at several other communities in our region. I'm not going to show those up here, but we looked at several other communities, and if you notice, our graph from basically 2012 to 2017 sort of follows the region. And most other communities follow the regions as well. But there was a big change in 2017 and 2018 where crashes dropped significantly. So, in the community. And that's when we built Summit Street. That's actually when we finished Summit Street. And we've tracked the crashes on Summit Street. For those who've been on council for a while, I've heard the crashes in Summit Street have reduced 60% from before construction to afterwards. And that's about 40-plus crashes a year. Okay, so when you look at the bicentennial plan and you see, hey, is it pedestrian-oriented? Do we do traffic management? You can see that. You can see it. You can make your judgment. Is this keeping the small town feel? Is this protecting the neighborhood? you really don't know what's going on with the crashes unless we look at something like this. And we looked at something like this, and to us, it's affirming that the direction that was committed to and we're moving forward is actually taking us into a safer community, which is a goal for one of the strategic values. So I'm almost done. So lastly, there's always other stuff going on. There's big stuff all the time, but there's also small stuff, and the small stuff has meaning. If you've been down North Water Street, you know we're going to paint the crosswalks with Main Street Kent. The volunteers are doing it. They finished one. They were going to start another one tomorrow. In the end, 10 crosswalks are going to be painted with art. Okay, basically going from Main Street up to Brady. So they cut their teeth in the first one on Brady Street, which is a smaller one. So kudos and thanks to all of them for doing this effort. So we got the agreement with Akron for the Lake Rockwell Trail to be able to build a bike trail over top their land here in the city, as you know. That's a venture that was started really a decade ago. The first conversations happened. So now we're going to move into the phase of planning and then designing construction. And actually the first piece will be done as with part of the North Manaway Street project that's scheduled for 2026 or 2027 to start. So the Safe Routes to School plan got finalized and submitted to ODOT. Now we can actually submit for grant funding through it to help us get more of these type of things done, things that help make it safer and more comfortable for school-age kids to walk to school. So key endeavors for next year, really, East Main Street is huge, obviously, but all the rest that's in there, the street and sidewalk program, the work at the water rec facility and the sewers, the work in the water system, and then if you notice the bottom three projects that are in design, we have significant number of partners for working on 59 to the east with the township, PARTA, and the DOT, as well as in North Main Street. We have got Davy Tree and Kent City Schools, and then at Stowe and Summit Street, the bridge plus a pedestrian and bike connection from Tannery to downtown, working with the Portage County Engineers Office. There's a lot of good things being put into the queue that people will start seeing in 26, 27, 28, 29, and beyond. So, again, thank you all. I appreciate it. The community appreciates everything that you guys do as your commitment to moving forward on these long-term improvements. So, thank you.
You, Jim. Are there any other questions for Jim before he leaves? Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
We do appreciate your work. But I see you're going to be back up here. Let's see.
Wow.
We have the ODOT Director's deed property transfer, and I assume that's going to be an action item? Okay.
So, we're requesting council's approval to accept a property transfer on Burnett Road from the Ohio Department of Transportation. In 1970, when 261 was built, for whatever reason, they carved off a little parcel that the cul-de-sac is on Burnett, and ODOT owns it. And ODOT's like, we can't maintain this. You know, they're not doing it. We're doing it. So we're asking to basically rectify that and accept the part that's in the city of Kent, and that property, accept that from ODOT.
Any questions from council? Yes, Heidi.
I see this is off of State Route 261. I'm not sure exactly where.
Behind that church, on the corner.
The Christian
Summit.
Life Center.
Plum Creek area.
Plum Creek.
No.
Area. It's in that area, right?
Near the Christian Life Center.
So this road is accessed off of Summit Street.
Yeah, Summit.
Oh.
There's no access from 261 onto Burnett.
Ah, got it.
Other questions from council? Seeing none, anyone in the audience have a question? Back to council.
Move to approve
Second.
with emergency.
With
Yes,
emergency.
please.
It's an emergency. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim. There you go, Mr.
All
Mayor.
right, we're in the Finance Committee. Mr. DeLeon.
Here comes Joan. Joan's going to go first, so we can.
Joan's going to go first.
I have no clue.
Health Department accreditation funding.
Good evening. So for those of you who are new, you may not realize that Ohio is the only state in the nation that is mandated by law to be accredited by the Public Health Accreditation Board. There is, of course, a cost that goes along with that. We attained our accreditation in 2022 during the height of pandemic, so an extra added bonus. But all the local health departments in the state of Ohio were told that we would be given some type of reimbursement to defray the costs of that. And so we've continually asked, when is the money coming? When is the money coming? In September, when I went to the Association of Ohio Health Commissioners workshop, the CDC was there, and FAB, they shared that they would be giving each local health department $50,000 to help offset the cost of being accredited. So each health department that is currently accredited will be given this money sometime either in December or first quarter of 2025. So I'm coming here to ask for your support in receiving this money and then using it for accreditation purposes.
Questions?
I have a question. Does it cover our costs?
Well, it will be...
Or did it cover?
Yeah, it will. It will cover, like, say, 2 years' worth of the annual fees and then some of the activities that we have to do. We have to do a community health improvement plan and assessment. We'll use some of that money towards that, and then hopefully towards some of the other things that we could do to help us maintain our accreditation. So, but it won't last for long. But it is a help, and it is finally coming. So,
great.
Further questions? Is there anyone in the audience that has anything? Back to council.
Move to approve with emergency?
Second.
Discussion, obviously. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you, Jim.
Now, Rhonda.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello. So I have 3 items on the agenda. We'll start first with the advance of property tax resolution. This is a housekeeping item for every single year whereby we request the county to advance us our property taxes periodically throughout the year. So just an approval to allow them to do that.
Questions? Seeing none, anybody in the audience? Back to council.
Move to approve.
Second.
With emergency.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That was quick.
Thank you.
You're not going to be quicker.
I'm going to try.
Okay.
You're going to try.
The capital plan is next. For those of you that are new, the capital plan is a 5-year forecast of projects that are necessary to keep the city of Kent viable. We, the city manager, the department heads, and staff meet annually to determine what projects are necessary for our short-term and our long-term needs. The short-term is obviously for next year, and you'll see all of those in the 2024 for 2025 pages, but then you'll also see those numbers in the budget book, which you'll see next month. The long-term portion is the years 2 through 5, which we do the best we can. We know when there's a project coming up, we insert it into the program, so that way we know what's going to be coming, so we can determine if we've got the funds available to work on those projects.
So if I could just jump and give a little preamble. I sort of do this every year because you only see it once a year. So first off, it's a real credit to council, staff, the community that we have such a multi-layered, frankly, it's a very sophisticated plan. Because we talk every year, we're like, this gives them more information than they probably need. And we always like, yeah, but they need to see how much goes into this. And what you don't necessarily realize, just if you were burying yourself in all this data, is this is exactly the framework that makes it possible for Jim to leverage dollars the way he does, right? I think the beauty of his presentation is we walk away with like, man, we get so much external funding that we're able to work into our programming. that doesn't happen by chance. I mean, it happens by hard work, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it, and the ability to plan is largely driven by this plan. And so, yes, you will go cross-eyed if you read this, and I apologize for that. And we still give you all those layers, though, just so that you have it, and if you can't sleep one night, go for it. But I do want you to know that really sort of the fundamental year is next year. The out years are planning years, and they change. Jim will tell you that. We'll all tell you that. We never predicted ARPA funding. As much as we hated COVID, ARPA funding made it possible for Jim to stand here and say, you know, we're halfway through whatever the funding for our sewer program, which if you had asked me a year ago or 2 years ago, I would have said, yeah, not happening. Because remember, we are not a wealthy community. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I don't mean that. No. It's just no value judgment. But we are a fairly low resourced community, and yet we outperform those resources year after year. Honestly, it's a point of pride. I mean, I know Jim feels this way, Rhonda, we all feel this way, Bridget too, she's a critical part of it. We love leveraging other people's money to the benefit of our community. And this kind of document is a framework for us to work within. And the other part that Jim added this year, and it may be really boring to you, but I use it, and you'll see it if you remember when I give kind of a, what did we do last year as a council? Where did we work? What categories? Those categories are the elements of the strategic plan. Jim mentioned the bicentennial plan, and that is sort of like, you know, the big bite of the apple. But every year we have drilled those down into actions that we've taken, just like Jim did, actions that he's taken in capital work towards safe community, towards economic development. We do that on an operating basis too. I just want you to know that that's important because everything is rooted in those things. And, you know, priorities can shift across those categories, but as Jim said, categories are pretty set, right? Everybody wants to live in a vibrant community. They want to feel safe. They want activities. They want a fun downtown. They want a healthy city that can take care of critical needs like you did tonight, right? Homeless aren't paying for themselves. So you, because we manage our funding and you've set a priority, the community has set a priority for taking care of our community, members of the community that can't take care of themselves. Well, the beauty is a lot of our economic development projects generate money that allow us to spend money which we wouldn't be able to generate off our taxes, our tax base in terms of our residents that live here. So that economic development is a driver for so many of those programs that can't pay for themselves. And that's, again, a point of pride in this community. You don't see that in a lot of communities. The social service funding that Bridget runs, that's relatively unique. But it's a part of our DNA as a community, so it's a part of our DNA strategic plan, it's in the capital plans too. So I want you just to know that we have working frameworks. We plan the work the plan, as the saying goes. But those frameworks are critical for us, and this is one piece of it. Those capital plan is a big piece of it. Our intention isn't to get into, fine detail here unless you've got a specific question. We'll touch on the highlights. She'll give you kind of the touch points that we think you need to know as you walk away. Again, focus mainly on 2025, though, because we're likely going to change things in 26, 27, 28. But we'll change it strategically because it's not just going to react. It's in the plan, and it's all going to work within the plan. So, Rhonda?
Yep. So I apologize that your book doesn't have page numbers, but if you go to the last 5 single-sided pages, the first one is an analysis of the water fund.
Which part did she say?
The last 5? The last 5 pages, so it's the 5th from the last. And then we'll work just to the last 5.
Oh.
It's right on the nose.
Okay. So the beginning balance for the water fund is projected to be approximately $3.3 million for next year. At the end of each year, we assess the highest priority projects. As Jim spoke about, the Wellfield Development Project is one of our largest for the water fund. If we don't have the money available, this project may get pushed off. if the project goes well, like Jim said, we currently have $2.5 million set aside for this in 2026. And that would then be, if, like you said, if the project goes well in 2025, we would then move on to the development stages. So that's some of the items that, I mean, that's just one item in the general, in the water fund, but.
If I could, again, I'll jump in, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Because I know if I were sitting in your shoes and this was new to me, and I see red on the bottom, that makes me nervous, right? Like, what is the red? Well, notice, it's in the out years. We would call that, it is an early warning sign of a potential problem, but we're not going to let potential problems happen. What Rhonda just kind of said, the beauty of the plan is, well, you move the work around, you shift your funding accordingly. If you can get outside funding sources, great. If it's critical enough, we can talk about a rate increase. But as Jim said years and years ago when we adopted the plan, we're not going to rate increase our way to pay for all our infrastructure needs. So that's where the plan comes into play. We shift, we move. So yes, we want it on your radar screen that the water fund is facing some issues probably in the next couple of years. But we also don't want you to lose sleep over it yet. It's on your radar screen. We're working on it. Just stay tuned, I guess.
And plus, the city put in the fund balance policy to try not to go below 25%. So that's what the calculation is, and that's why you're seeing it as a negative starting in 2026 forward. So on the next page, the sewer fund. Per Jim's discussion, the sewer fund is decades-long investments in the upgrade to the plant. We will start 2025 off with approximately $4.8 million of cash. We are starting this fund with more money than we expected because of grants that we didn't expect. We're putting more expenditures of some of the projects into the ARPA fund because we have to budget the ARPA fund so it has a zero balance at the end of 2024. The money doesn't have to be spent until 2026, but if we don't spend the money by 2026, we actually have to pay it back. So our intentions are budget it all this year, which it is, and spend it by 2026. And then some of the projects that we bid out came in lower than expected. So that's helping the beginning balance for next year to increase. On the next page, any questions? On the storm, I'm going to fly through this. On the stormwater fund, we're expecting to start approximately $1.9 million for 2025. The fund doesn't have the projects that are as with the same level of priority as the water and sewer fund. So you'll see that this fund doesn't really have the same amount of capital activity in it. And the other thing that we're going to note is that we're not anticipating any kind of a rate increase for this particular fund anytime soon. Now, the one thing that we added for this year as compared to last year is the solid waste fund. We wanted you to get a picture of what the solid waste fund has looked like over the years. And one of the things with this fund is we feel that, or I felt that this fund wasn't being utilized in the past because of the lawsuit that we had with some of the apartment buildings and such. So this fund, we've started to utilize some of the expenditures in this fund from salaries from other areas that are doing work for solid waste. And then we are trying to have it be a self-sustaining fund whereby it purchases the capital needs for this fund. So a leaf truck, for example. This fund has been subsidized by the capital fund in the past, and the leaf trucks have been purchased from capital money versus the solid waste fund. So we'd like to be able to utilize this fund going forward for those types of purchases. So if you look in 2027, you'll see that we are starting to get into the lower levels of our policy, our fund balance policy. So a discussion at some point for a rate increase for this fund is probably coming. The last page here of the capital plan, this is a combination of the general fund, the income tax fund, the street construction maintenance and repair fund, the income tax safety fund, which is basically the police department, and then fire, EMS, and capital. This is all part of our operating funds. So you'll see that we are anticipating 2025 to start off with almost 18.5 million. In the capital fund, which is included in here, we allocate 25% of the engineering department's salaries to that fund to help with costs, to alleviate the general fund, and then to put the expenditures where the projects are, right? We have been very conservative with our spending in the capital fund because of the East Main Street project, knowing that it's coming and that there's going to be a city's portion that's going to be having to be paid out over the next few years. So we've been conservative with that, so that way we have the fund balance available and we don't have to issue debt or take out loans for our portion. And as Jim alluded to in his presentation, you have a $22.2 million project. City's portion is expected to be 2.3 million or less. It's pretty good. So.
What also, if I could add, it may not be obvious, but what we've been trying to do, when I first got here, everything was very much kind of lumped together. So, and what I mean by that is like water, sewer, general fund, road. There was a lot of overlap. There was a lot of cross subsidies. And that's fine when you don't have a lot of money. You put it all in one bucket and you just take turns pulling it out. What we tried to do, and we've been successful with it, is to slowly unbundle those into their own funds. That's why you see the utility funds, which include water, sewer, storm, and like she said, solid waste too. We're trying to get to a more, I don't want to say full cost accounting, but close. I mean, I think that's slightly unrealistic in our business to be full cost accounting, to expect every fund to pay everything for itself. I think there's value in a community where you can't plan for everything, to have enough liquidity to be able to cross if you needed to. Now, utility funds are legislatively required to be used in the utility. So it's really what we're talking about is the general taxes used to just be thrown around. We're going to throw some in water, throw some in sewer. And I don't think that's as an effective way to manage it. And that's kind of why we got to this categories, better managing it. And really, it's worked. If you were able to look back, if you look at the amount of work, like Jim has said, the amount of paving that we do every year has tripled. But that hasn't been a rate increase. It hasn't been a tax increase. Part of that has been all these things that were done to better require the water and sewer fund to pay for their costs, which is what that other piece of paper with the charts that you have. This one is your utility rate plan. Okay, so this was something council adopted in 2011. It's basically a companion plan to the capital plan, because this is, in large measure, the revenues that feed into the water and sewer fund. Council, to their credit again, because if you think about like Akron, which all of a sudden had to come up with 30% rate increases to pay for all these huge sewer bills, our council said we can't do that to our customers. There needs to be better planning. And as much as it might be nice to have 0% this year, it's equally horrible to have 20% a couple of years later. So they asked us to kind of mortgage it, spread it across. And that's why council adopted a rate plan in 2011 that basically said every year, once we had to make up some in the beginning. So that is, you'll see the higher bars in the beginning. But after that, it's basically 3% a year in water and sewer. That's pretty de minimis. It's like a couple bucks on a sewer or water bill. All that data is in here if you want that. But once again, there's been a couple years where, for various reasons, some of the numbers in the plan were red, and we're like, we're going to have to generate a little bit more, and that's why you'll see bumped up. But equally, there were years where we said, this is a tough time for our residents. They're seeing this increase or whatever in something other area. Let's go below what the plan said. So we've tried to be equally, plus and minus on the rate plan. Use it as a guide. And so for this year, it's sticking to the plan, the 3%, which is really probably right about on inflation. So we're not really gaining, but we're holding steady with what we can do. We're not looking to the rates to fix all our water and sewer problems, but they're part of the solution. So that's my little pitch on that. Sorry.
And we have as part of the income tax allocation, in the codified ordinances, a percentage has to go to the capital fund. So that's what's helping the capital fund also pay for a a lot of the projects that are in there. That's it.
Further, any questions?
Well, I would just say, I'm glad that you talked about that charter requirement. I think there are a lot of people who don't realize that in their wisdom, to make sure that we were putting money into capital projects, that there is that charter requirement. I think that's significant. I want to mention something, though. I noticed that there's a projection on the undesignated fund balance that we tended to, we've increased, and we kind of peaked here in 2023 to 22 million, and then it's coming down. Is part of that reasoning that we're coming down speaks to what Dave is talking about, that we've managed to?
Well, you have to keep in mind too, the city hall.
Oh, the city hall,
money
yeah.
went into this page.
Yeah.
And that's being spent down.
That's what's being spent down, okay. So, well, that makes sense then. Right. I think that the average person would look at that and say, wow, what's going on there? No, I think the city hall was a primary example, though, of being able to do something without a tax increase, as Dave alluded to, that we managed to do it because of good budgeting and good management on the whole part of the administration. And
Good timing for low interest rates.
yeah, good timing for low interest rates, yeah. Well, we'll take luck, won't we,
Right,
sometimes?
for sure.
Thank you, Ron.
Further questions? I know if you have any questions, she's the one to talk to. Because you'll have a question, and you can just give her a call.
Yeah.
She'll take care of it. Do you want your books back?
Approve it.
Oh, after I approve it?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make the motion, Mike.
Make motion?
I'll move to approve the cap plan for the 2025.
Second. Further questions at all? Further, anybody in the audience? Back to council. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The last
Last
item I
thing.
have is I have a budget amendment request from October 22nd, 2024. This is actually a net reduction in our appropriation.
Questions? Anyone in the audience? Back to council?
Move to approve
Second.
with the emergency.
It's not bad. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, land use, there's no business to take place tonight, so we are adjourned.
All right.